Daniel.
Hello. Sorry, Lizzie, I'm struggling to hear you. I'm only getting every second word.
I'm going to hang up and call back.
Okay.
What she wants to do, call back?
Yep. Everything's testing us tonight, isn't it?
Okay. What are you struggling with at the moment, Daniel?
Getting her no input onto ME4.
They can hear us on the live stream, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
Oh yeah, Ben.
Yes.
I can't have WhatsApp open, so I'm going to use it on my phone. But if I'm not as responsive, that's why.
I'll bear it in mind. No worries.
Hello and welcome to CoronaNomics What Just Happened, brought to you by Econ Films, where we look at the biggest events of yet another historic week with you, our live audience. Thank you for waiting through all the technical problems. We hope It'll be worth your wait. So please join the conversation and ask us a question on the YouTube comments or on Twitter using the hashtag CoronaNomics. I'm Lizzy Burden, economics reporter at The Telegraph.
And I'm Ben Chu, economics editor of The Independent. Well, it's been a tumultuous 7 days, particularly in American news. Donald Trump most graciously allowed Joe Biden to begin the formal preparations to become the next president. This is a picture of Rudy Giuliani when he heard that shocking news. And from the White House, this heartwarming Thanksgiving message.
The winner of this vote was decided by a fair and open election conducted on the White House website. This was a fair election. Unfortunately, Carrots refused to concede and demanded a recount, and we're still fighting with Carrots. And I will tell you, we've come to a conclusion. Carrots, I'm sorry to tell you, the result did not change. It's too bad for Carrots.
Too bad for Carrots indeed. Imagine not accepting the result of a fair vote. What a silly turkey. Meanwhile, the Biden camp also revealed that Janet Yellen will be the next US Treasury Secretary. We hope to see Janet smiling, Janet glaring, and hopefully not too much of Janet worrying. Thanks so much to Twitter for those montages, place where we get all of our best ideas.
Joining us this week is Torsten Bell, Chief Executive of the Resolution Foundation, who enjoyed coming on the programme so much in season 1 that he's pinched our name for an upcoming We're also joined by Helen Barrnard, Director of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Welcome to you both.
Now, before we go to our guests' moments of the week, we've got our regular audience poll. And as Elon Musk overtakes Bill Gates to become the second richest man in the world, we want to know which of the two has the better policy on COVID, Elon or Bill. Now, some context here. Musk has insisted the virus is not very dangerous, that young people aren't vulnerable, that doctors are misattributing deaths to COVID-19. He sent his employees back to work at his California Tesla factory, defying local health advice, which he called fascist. He also recommended a herd immunity approach and said he wouldn't get vaccinated. He, of course, caught COVID earlier this month. Meanwhile, Bill Gates has been warning about pandemics for years and is spending $150 million from his foundation to distribute vaccines to some of the world's poorest people. Not a hard choice in our view, but let us know what you think at CoronaNomics TV, and we'll discuss what you come up with at the end of the programme. Now, on to the moments of the week. Helen, what was your moment of the week?
So it's got to be the spending review, where the Chancellor laid out what they're going to be spending for the next year, which reminded me very much of the children's book, The Gruffalo's Child.
Oh.
Why?
Well, parents out there will probably know this. For non-parents, so The Gruffalo's Child, it starts with little Gruffalo in a cave, and there's lots of build-up about its parent Gruffalo saying there's this big bad mouse, it's a massive monster. Gruffalo's child sneaks out to go and find the big bad monster, eventually finds it. It's this massive shadowy creature, and as the Gruffalo's child goes home, there's this tiny little mouse that has been very clever in making everyone think that it's big and bold. And for me, that's, I'm afraid, what the Chancellor's spending review was. Lots and lots of hype and talk about levelling up and jobs and skills, and when we drilled into the numbers, remarkably little action.
Well, let me bring you in here, Torsten. I mean, there was lots of kite flying, wasn't there, before this spending review? Just tell us, I mean, you've been on the inside of this thing. How much is that kite flying? Is it as Machiavellian as it seems? Are they putting out a policy out there and see how it goes down, and they may not keep it, or they may keep it depending on the reaction? Is that actually how it works?
You've definitely seen politicians who thought that was a good way to do business. I'd say for budgets, what you've seen more in the run into this spending review, is the setting of expectations on some of the supposed tough choices being taken. So we saw that on public sector pay, where the Chancellor, put it out there that there was going to be a freeze on public sector pay, so that he could then make it sound like it was good news that public sector workers earning below £24,000 would get a £250 pay rise. So you tend to get things like that, or on cuts to aid budgets, which is what the Chancellor has obviously chosen to want to have the row about this week and has dominated lots of the coverage, and that's clearly intentional. He's then later wanted to say, but don't worry, we'll put the money back up again later in a few years. So what it's really about is delivering the media show for the spending review rather than about what the substance is delivering.
Yeah. We've got some tech issues, so Lizzy is we can't get her image in, but we'll hopefully get her back shortly. In the meantime, we have had a question from Professor Julia Rouse, and she says the real question is how to invest for health, equality and productivity. Helen, do you want to field that one? How should the Chancellor have accomplished all of those things today, this week?
Well, I mean, talking to people in the health field, what lots of people say is the biggest driver of ill health, one of the biggest drivers, is poverty. So when you have lots of people who are trapped in a situation where they can't afford the basics and they have enormous amounts of stress and anxiety, that is very bad for health. When you have people trapped in not very good jobs with no way of progressing, that's bad for productivity. So if the Chancellor had followed through on the rhetoric, if he had actually delivered the skills package and the levelling up package that he could have done, that is how he could have turbocharged both productivity and health. But sadly, we didn't see that substance, which I think could have delivered both of those.
We also we've had a question from Paul Kearney in London, and maybe you can feel this one, Torsten. He says the OBR figures showed UK GDP figures were very poor, but was this due to poor policy or because the size of the UK's service sector? I know you spoke a bit about this in your report this morning, but what was the answer you came up with?
So the fall in GDP of over 11% this year, the worst for 300 years, is clearly not what you're looking to achieve, and lots of early indications of the peak of the hit from this crisis earlier during this year show the UK being amongst the worst in the developed world. Some of that, I have to say, is about measurement differences, about how we account for the public sector within our national account. So we should discount some of those. But even if we look in nominal terms, so ignoring the problems we have in measuring inflation fairly across economies, we can see the UK has taken a bigger hit than some other countries. And a lot of that is to do with the depth of the lockdown, and that's obviously driven by the degree to which we have allowed the virus to get out of control, and that's then necessitated harder lockdowns. That's what happened earlier in the crisis, and that's exactly what we've just been through for the last few years. It's also to do with the makeup of our economy. We have a larger service sector, and this I don't mean just a service sector in terms of, everyone's got restaurants and everyone's got leisure facilities, the bits of the economy that are most shut down by this crisis, but we also have just a broader service sector. Our comparative advantages in tradable business services, whereas the German economy, for example, is in manufacturing, and that they seem to have had a tougher time during this crisis. But what I would say is, whereas we know as a point of fact that the UK did badly in terms of excess deaths in the first wave of this crisis, much less bad in the second wave, but in the first wave, we know that as a fact. I would say we should wait and see before we come to firm judgments about which countries have had the worst economic outcome from this crisis, not least because policy making next year really matters. The countries that get the vaccine rolled out well effectively and allow themselves to reopen more fully, and the governments that support their economies through that to deliver a strong recovery, that's what will determine the outcome. So this, it's still early days, I'm afraid, in this crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Wait and see. Now, on the another big controversy was the failure, which I know JRF and Resolution have both pointed out, of the Chancellor to extend that £20 a week increase in universal credit. A lot of this sort of, well, the received wisdom, if you like, Helen, is that he will do it, but not till the last minute. Is that what you think is going to happen?
I guess that's what I hope will happen. Although, to be honest, he could change his mind before Christmas, and that would be the right thing to do, because the idea of leaving millions of families to go through Christmas not knowing if they're going to have a massive income cut in April is just really bizarre. The other thing, though, that hasn't been talked about that should have done is that there are a couple of million people on the old style legacy benefits. So most disabled people who get help are not on universal credit, they're on legacy benefits. Now, those take longer to implement any rises. So if the Chancellor is going to boost those, which he clearly should, there is actually a kind of hard deadline, end of November, maybe a little bit further, that he has to do that. So the fact he didn't mention it suggests his plan is to leave disabled people to go through the rest of this storm without any extra help, which is what's happened this year. And we've seen incredible levels of hardship among disabled people and carers, people having to miss meals, people not being able to afford medication. So that was also the kind of dog that didn't bark, but we should note that that was a policy decision not to do that.
Yes, indeed. Right, well, we're going to move on to your moment of the week now, Torsten. Let's hear what it is.
Well, you've already talked about this a bit, but I thought it's good to have some good news. So
Exactly.
Joe Biden yelling for Yellen, I think, is a good thing for everyone to celebrate. It's good, I always think it's good to have a Labour economist basically doing any job. It's the good bit of economics. And she's the first woman to be the Treasury Secretary, but she's also the first person ever to hold the 3 big economic jobs in US economic policy making, ran the Fed, ran the chair of economic advisors in the Council of Economic Advisors in the White House, and now this. So that's great. I think it's also great that she's experienced, so she'll be good at it, and she's a decent